lot of people. It's just bad. It's real bad.
I cannot believe that he was still out there. I cannot believe.
I just hope everybody's okay and we make it through this.
It's gut-wrenching. It touches you to the core. You know, what can I do for my neighbor? Everything else goes out the window.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Call lines are open, 866-963-2037. The website is urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy for the podcast and stacyontheright.com for everything else. So what we're going to get into today is a lot of Hurricane Harvey coverage. I do have some news for you, some different things we're going to cover that have to do with the news specifically. First segment, we're doing all Hurricane Harvey. We're listening to some of the good news things, some of the bad news things. There's been a couple of really negative developments, but not shocking. Whenever there's upheaval, societal upheaval, disaster, something like that, you're going to see the best of people and the worst of people. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to have an interview with Anna Massoglia, research analyst for Bloomberg Bureau of National Affairs. She's going to come on and talk about Sarah Palin's lawsuit against the New York Times being dismissed and the prospects going forward. And then also, I'm going to be kind of skipping around a little bit. Senator Mike Lee gave us some information on getting tax reform done, and he made a statement that I feel like is really important for us to pay attention to. He echoed my own comments, and remember, he's been on the show before to talk about his latest book, and so we really respect the senator and his views on how to get tax reform done. So we're going to listen to that audio, talk about the world turning a blind eye to the slave trade, and a great piece by a friend of mine who blogs at a site, Mental Recession, if the federal people, so the federal government, really wanted to help, they would do a few things. And so there are some things that could be done. And he did a fantastic blog piece about that. And then in hour two, we have Amanda Prestigiacomo, staff writer for the Daily Wire. She's going to come on and talk about Planned Parenthood, asking about dating and having it backfire on them on social media. And then Tyler Whaley, associate pastor for the First Church in South Houston, Texas, is going to close out the second hour for us, bringing us live updates from Houston and the surrounding area. And he's going to talk to us. He's a pastor. He's going to talk about how the church is leading rescue operations in the Pearland, Friendswood, and Southwest Houston areas, and talk to us about the website firstchurch.com. I've posted some information on my Facebook page about what you can do to get in line first. In other words, if you're in the Houston area, if you're somewhere in Texas and you're affected by the floods, the first thing you want to do is get your house cleaned out. So I'm talking about post, receding of the waters. You're just getting back to your home. You've had flood damage, and every single water remediation company, they're all going to be booked up. Well, the Latter-day Saints and the Catholic Church have already teamed up together. They're going to be having members of their church community traveling down to the state of Texas and doing the demo. So if you've ever had water damage before, you know that the first thing they have to do is get all of the damaged drywall, flooring, and items. So your household items that have been touched by floodwater, usually that's a total loss. So unless it's made of something that can be disinfected, so metal, ceramic, something like that. So usually they just come in and they clean everything out into dumpsters. That can be up to a third of whatever your homeowner's insurance or flood remediation award is. That can take up to a third of it. Speaking from personal experience here at our house. So there's also the setting up of those machines that basically suck all of the moisture out of everything that's left so that the place is completely dry so that it can be put back to the way it was before. So you can't get around that machine usage that you need for 3 to 4 days, but you can get rid of almost a third of the cost by having someone help you do the demo yourself. And that's what these church nonprofits are offering to do, to send volunteers down, but you have to get in line. So the information is on my Facebook page. If you're in Texas or you have family in Texas, you can call. I already called the number to make sure that it is legitimate. It is. You give them your name and address and some information, and they put you in touch with someone in your area who's going to be doing that work so you can get it's going to be basically first come, first serve. So you can get in line to have that done at your home. And this is the kind of stuff that we're going to have to kind of touch on as we move through the actual hurricane and floodwater period, and then post flood, it takes years to get an area back up to speed. Well, an area the size of Houston and 52 other counties and municipalities, cities, etc., nearby, adjacent to Houston, this is a huge area of Texas that has been negatively impacted. And coming on the heels of that, now the storm is moving into Louisiana. And so in that vein, early this morning, Fox and Friends had kind of a Hurricane Harvey weather update. Let's listen to that.
Another landfall you mentioned in Louisiana, Cameron, Louisiana, and we're still not out of the woods in terms of heavy rainfall for not only southeast Texas, but now Louisiana up towards the Mississippi River Valley. Houston, your days of drying out begin today. But there's the tornado threat. We actually had a tornado warned storm west of New Orleans. We're watching this future radar. So still this area of low pressure, Tropical Storm Harvey, will remain stationary, and then it will start to move beginning in the next 12 to 18 hours, and it will be picked up by a cold front, a trough that will move this north and eastward over the weekend, but we still could see upwards of a foot of rainfall across the Mississippi River Valley as well as Louisiana. But look at Houston. This morning we are reporting no inches of rainfall, but still the river waters, the bayou waters are going to remain high. Major flood stage until at least next week. So any more rain in the forecast is not going to be a welcome sight. But for the foreseeable next 4 or 5 days, we're in the clear.
So that's good news for Houston, not so good for Louisiana. They've been through this recently a couple of times with major weather patterns going through and then leaving behind damage in their wake. So they're bracing for what's about to happen. So the Houston dryout has begun. Airports are reopening, and it is up to this moment, the costliest natural disaster in history. And this is a chance for Americans to pull together. And I really feel like a lot of people are embracing that. Maybe not on CNN and MSNBC, but remember, they're not the bulk of Americans. Sure, millions of Americans watch their programming, but multiple tens of millions more don't watch their programming and are ready, willing, and able to help. And so as we begin to gear up into the donation period where you can either send items, we're going to have information on that, where you can send money, where we would give to that. I'm not giving money to the United Way because the United Way has partnered with Planned Parenthood, and they have a way of siphoning off a certain percentage of all the dollars that are donated and sending that tiny sliver from United Way to Planned Parenthood. And there's no way to trust that they won't do that with this money, even if it's designated for Hurricane Harvey victims. So rather than work through that, I'm just not giving any money through the United Way. So I will be sharing some different places we can work through. But right now, the primary means of support is obviously that we're praying for the people who are affected by the storm and trying to keep ourselves from getting sucked into, like yesterday was the big Joel Osteen thing about him, helping or not helping. There've been other, like there's these flare-ups, like the fact that Melania Trump wore high heels, for about 15 minutes while she was going from the building, the White House, into Air Force One. That was supposed to be a huge big deal. Not really. And there have been some interesting stories. I don't have audio, and I didn't post it on my Facebook page, but you must have seen the viral video of the young woman with her daughter. And I believe it was a CNN reporter she agreed to the interview. And the reporter put the microphone in her face. And I think at that moment, she just broke. It was just her breaking point, having to answer questions, being asked how you feel. And it was just a moment where she couldn't take it anymore. And so she lost her temper. I think there are probably a lot more instances where people are close to that point or feel like they're at that point. And so we just have to keep praying for the area and looking for ways that we can help. A couple of the shelters themselves have flooded. The other big story was a mom saved her daughter but drowned, and the toddler was found clinging to the mom who had passed away. They have updates on the rainfall totals, and Louisiana, oddly enough, bracing for waters themselves, are sending in the National Guard to Texas. The Marines have been down through with tanks, and people are really sick and tired of the looters. People are sick and tired of the just opportunists. And so I'm wondering what we're going to see coming out of that. This happens every single time there's a disaster. You're going to have looters. But in addition to that, there have been good news stories. And so H-E-B is a grocery chain down in the South, and they have begun hot meal service. Let's listen to them describe what they're doing for hungry, cold, tired people who have been displaced by the flood in number 3.
Hi, everyone. Well, we just pulled into Rockport a few minutes ago and got our truck situated. And this is really, as we were driving in, the first time we saw just the visual devastation from Hurricane Harvey. And I know it personally breaks my heart. The Texas coast holds a really special place in the hearts of all Texans. And we are just feeling for the residents of Rockport as well as some of the other coastal towns that got hit the hardest. I'm standing in front of what used to be one of our H-E-B signs here at our Rockport store, which is still closed, but we've got teams in there working around the clock to get it cleaned and ready to go. We're here. Our plan is to serve a warm meal at 4 o'clock. We're joining some other folks who are in town doing the same, and we're proud to be here alongside of them. So we hope that our first responders and our residents of Rockport will join us later so we can shake their hand and give them something hot to eat. And we'll keep you posted throughout the day.
And so they're not the only ones. There are a number of places that have already been setting up to provide hot food to the people who are currently sheltering. They're saying that number is around 30,000 people who are currently in shelters someplace. And then there are untold numbers of people, no counts available, who were taken in by church, family, extended family of their own, or individuals. Apparently, Airbnb has special ads in place that if you're displaced by the hurricane, you can get special pricing on Airbnb rentals. So this is really, America turning their pockets out, turning their hands out, and turning their hearts out to support other Americans who are displaced. And it is stunning to see the level of devastation that's going on down there with, highways completely submerged. And so, the alternative to what everyone's been doing that's so fantastic is the negative things that are going on. And one of those things has been discussed. So they have the Cajun boat rescue guys, and some of these boats are manned by teenagers. There's been a story out about these 3 teenage boys, 3 or 4 of them. I can't tell which are the teenagers, and they rescued 50 people on early days. So 2 days ago, they rescued 50 people. I don't know what the number is up to by now, but these boys, 14, 15, and 16, they brought their boat over when the hurricane first was purported to come through. They went, I guess, to Galveston and brought the boat in. They woke up and there was water up to their beds. So they got out, got into their boat, and they started going out to look and see just the lay of the land after the hurricane hit. And they saw people stranded. And so they started ferrying them over to where they could go to a shelter. The Kroger was where they were taking the people. And they just kept doing it. They just kept working. And so you have a lot of people doing that. People who own boats are just, getting out there and helping people because the Coast Guard and the police can't do it all. So you've got the Cajun boat rescue crews, and they're out doing this work. And then they're getting shot at, and people are freaking out. And so we'll talk a little bit about what happens to people when there's an emergency. Let's listen to number 8.
And now we have a boat broke down, and the guys are in a FedEx truck right now, and the people that are wanting to be rescued are trying to steal the boat, so even though it doesn't run.
People actually want to steal the boat? Are these bad people or people who need to be rescued?
Just, bad people and people who want to be rescued, just people that are just panicking.
Oh, my goodness. How many rescues have you performed so far? What? Wait, we'll go back to that. You've had a guy being shot at?
We have boats being shot at because they're, if we're not picking everybody up, we're having to pull out for a minute. So we're dropping an airboat right now to go rescue a couple of our boats that broke, and they're kind of under attack.
So what you're telling me is it's too dangerous to rescue people right now because you're being shot at.
Shot at, overrun with the boat, everyone trying to just get in the boat, not following directions.
All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you here on Station.
The Awakening on Urban Family Talk.
There were a bunch of people who thought Obama was the Messiah. there are a lot of people who are kind of treating Trump like that.
Bishop E. Urban Family Talk.
I think we're coming in with cut one.
You and I have talked about this. You're clearly not happy. Are we out at this point, out of diplomatic paths?
Well, I think the time is so short that it's hard to see how any of them can work. With respect to North Korea, people should remember we have negotiated with North Korea for 25 years on this question, during which time North Korea has repeatedly committed to giving up its nuclear weapons program and repeatedly lied about it. So my view, let's look at history. There's no point in talking to North Korea. They're happy to talk. It buys them time, which they use to increase the sophistication of their nuclear and ballistic missile programs. I think the only diplomatic play left is with China on reunifying the peninsula. I'm not sure we've got time left for it. I would certainly try it because I think you should exhaust the diplomatic options. But what North Korea did by firing this missile over Japan, obviously demonstrating it could hit Japan and hit Guam, which would be within the estimated range of this missile, is they haven't backed down one iota. And I think the situation is such that we have to consider the military option, not because we think it's a great idea, not because we want to run the risk today, but because we don't want to run the risk tomorrow of the innocent American civilian population being held hostage by this rogue regime.
Wow. Really interesting conversation with Ambassador Bolton on Fox Business, talking about North Korean aggression. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Anna Massoglia, research analyst for Bloomberg Bureau of National Affairs, former political nonprofits researcher for the Center for Responsive Politics, Hey, Anna, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So let's talk about this. Sarah Palin sued the New York Times for, I believe it was defamation, and then now she's had her suit dismissed, but it's not really over, is it?
No, that's correct. She still has the opportunity to appeal her lawsuit. Just to give listeners a bit of background, she had sued the New York Times over an editorial piece that had been published in June after the tragic shootings in the baseball field of Congressman Scalise and a few of his colleagues. And the New York Times had issued a very reactionary editorial that mentioned Sarah Palin's political action committee, which includes her name, and had linked it to a previous shooting of, among others, Representative Abby Gifford, and had said that that had somehow at least was linked to the shooting, if not had spawned it somehow. But what the suit ended up being filed over was not necessarily that they had linked her to it because they were able to say certain things. It was that they had misrepresented what she had done in order to that. Originally, the article had mentioned that there were targets placed on other senators and congressmen by the political action committee, but they were in actuality only placed over states. And the ties that they were drawing between her and the shooting were only barely relevant to the editorial at issue. And because of that, she ended up filing defamation suit over it. But she had a very high level of proof that she would have had to have reached, so the judge ended up throwing it out as of yesterday.
So if
at least for now.
Right. So if she appeals, then the opportunity is for her to then kind of revisit the issue, right? Or, I mean, because if she had a high threshold at that level, if she appeals, won't the threshold remain as high, or will she have an opportunity to go back and find some more information?
Unfortunately, she still has a very high threshold as a public figure. In order to win a defamation suit, you have to be able to prove actual malice, which means that the New York Times would have had to either know that what they were printing was wrong and incorrect, but printed it anyways, or had a malicious intent in some other way. And while it's pretty well known, and the judge actually acknowledges in the opinion that the New York Times isn't very friendly with Ms. Palin, that's not necessarily enough to prove malice in and of itself. One of the arguments that she had made, however, is that they had previously known that she wasn't really tied to the shooting, since the shooting was done by someone entirely unrelated to her that had mental issues, and the fact that a political action committee could spawn someone to commit such atrocities hard to actually prove or show in any way. But she will have the opportunity to information and possibly make at least a more persuasive argument with the information that she has at hand. So it has yet to be seen.
So help me to understand this. So you've got them knowing. So they had to have known that she didn't have anything to do with the shooting, and that she couldn't be held responsible for inspiring it, because, I mean, honestly, it could be her. If that's the case, then you could also say that Bernie Sanders had something to do with it, because the guy was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and Bernie Sanders has spoken quite strongly about people taking action and not being passive, et cetera, et cetera. So they had to have known that if the guy was inspired by anyone, it wouldn't have been primarily her, since he wasn't one of her supporters.
Yes, that's correct. And actually, the shooting they were referencing in the article wasn't actually the shooting in June. It was a shooting that happened many years prior. They wanted to make a more overall statement on the use of guns and inspiring political violence. So they had tried to make a tie that wasn't necessarily there, and ended up doing a very poor job of it.
And then instead of correcting the column or removing it, they chose to just leave it there, and they're happily receiving the suit from her, I guess, is what we could say.
Well, they ended up issuing 2 separate corrections, but the article is still up, since the content itself wasn't necessarily objectionable. The only things that they ended up changing were the crosshairs were not necessarily over the faces of senators, they were over their districts, which I'm not sure how that was supposed to inspire shootings necessarily, but it seems like the ties that they were making weren't necessarily there, and the corrections they made were minimal.
So if a news organization has malice towards a person, what constitutes proof of that malice?
Well, the biggest thing would be the knowledge of whether or not what they were saying was true or false. And in this case, there's evidence on both sides. It ends up getting down to the point of what issue they were looking at and what that knowledge necessarily needs to be of. The New York Times itself had issued a series of articles saying that Ms. Palin was not actually connected, one, to the PAC and to what they were issuing at that time, to the shooting. And these were articles that they had issued years ago. In this case specifically, however, the judge wanted to see what the writer of the editorial had known. And even though the editorial was listed under New York Times editorial rather than a specific writer's name, they were able to pinpoint the author, and they ended up bringing her into the court and seeing whether or not she had knowledge of that. And I guess the judges concluded that she did not, which is a little bit hard in the internet age, since those articles are still readily available to be Googled, and one would assume even in the archives of the New York Times itself.
Right, which are forever, because they have articles from long ago that may not have even been during that time, like the more popular time for people to post articles, but they've gone in and they've put them into the internet because they want to make their work available so people can reference it. So this is something that's still out there. Instead of retracting it, they're just leaving it there, which makes it extraordinarily difficult for her to escape the insinuation.
That's correct, and they didn't end up removing her name from the article in general, although they issued the correction. Her name is still very much in the article. The reference to her political committee being tied to the previous shooting is very much still in the article. And it doesn't paint a very pretty picture in terms of saying that she is tied to that she is spawning political violence, and that in of itself, while not necessarily defamatory, isn't really the nicest thing to say in an article, and it certainly doesn't seem like something that a national news organization should be issuing. That said, freedom of press is important, and the judge seemed to recognize that as well. And in his eyes, he did not see enough to move the case forward, at least in his courtroom. And if they're able to present additional information to prove that at appeal, we'll see how far the case goes.
All right. Well, let's pivot over to the information that they're now kind of sharing about everything that's going on. I don't know if you saw this, but big labor is actually exploiting Hurricane Harvey to use it for labor organizing. The Texas Organizing Project Education Fund is looking to make inroads into the state because Texas is a right-to-work state. Do you think people are going to actually pay attention to this, or do you think it's going to be more of a situation where they're actually in anguish over losing their possessions and they're just trying to figure out where they're going to eat and sleep for the night? This is almost insulting.
I think that in a lot of respects, they're not necessarily going to pay the attention this would get at other times. I think the focus at this point shouldn't be on politics or on the political aspect of it. It should be on people coming together to help those that have lost their homes and lost so much over the last few days. And I think it's disgusting that anyone would exploit that, especially for your own political views, and especially in a way that that the people who are giving you money don't necessarily know where that's going and don't know, they may think it's going to go support these flood victims, going to help rebuild, going to help their shelters. And if it's actually going to someone's political agenda, that's just a horrible exploitation.
It is. It is. I'm concerned that this is indicative of a real lack of a lack of understanding of how desperate people are right now and how afraid they are and how uncertain things are for them because they know they can't go home and they don't. Some of these people don't have anywhere to go. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 30,000 people in shelters. If everyone had family to go to or something like that, then this wouldn't be an issue. But for people who have maybe their family lives in the area and they're all displaced, these people really are concerned primarily with the very basics that so many of us are taking for granted right now.
They are, and they're concerned about making sure their family is alive and safe and fed. In a lot of areas, the roads aren't necessarily drivable, so people aren't able to get to their families, aren't able to get out of the towns that have been affected. And to some extent, the exploitation side of this is disgusting, but it's been heartwarming to see the other people who are actually doing so much good in Texas and are opening their doors, especially all the stores who you wouldn't necessarily have expected to just open their doors and let people in. I've seen a number of those occurrences. You're seeing the National Guard going in and saving people's pets. You're seeing just an outpour of love and support for Texas, and I think that's where people's minds need to be, not on politics.
You know, I got to say, Anna, it's amazing the kinds of stories that are coming out about people helping each other. And I just want to give some more detail on this because I've said I want to make sure people know, at least from what I know, what I can find out, the best places to give. And also, if I find a place that's not a good place to give, this organization is actually sponsored by a number of prominent liberal advocacy groups and politically influential unions, the SEIU, Communication Workers of America, Faith in Texas, a group that fights for economic and racial justice, so basically a racial grievance group, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, Texas Housers, an affordable housing advocate, and the labor-affiliated Workers Defense Project. They're saying that they're going to take whatever is donated to them. They're calling it the Harvey Hurricane Relief Fund, but they're going to organize and advocate for devastated communities, shining a spotlight on inequalities that emerge in the restoration of lives, livelihoods, and homes, amplifying the needs of hard-hit communities. This sounds like they're going to do nothing but talk a really good talk and make people feel like they're not being treated properly, when what people really need are diapers, staples, food, a clean, dry place to sleep and stay and kind of launch off of and help cleaning up. So I would encourage people not to give to the Harvey Hurricane Relief Fund. And to add insult to injury, Anna, it's being repped by Linda Sarsour, the Women's March, anti-Israel activist.
I think that's just so deceptive to call it something like that and to end up using the funds for something that is entirely unrelated to the needs of people right now. I think that that's just a sham on donors. I think that that's just a poor use of their resources. I think that even with a number of political campaigns right now have stopped campaigning for themselves and started soliciting donations for the hurricane fund. I've gotten emails from political parties saying, don't donate to us, donate to these relief funds. And those are more legitimate relief funds. And to have something like this where they couch what they're doing as hurricane relief and use the funds for something like that people wouldn't necessarily agree with who are giving to them, if they say, oh, well, I'm giving to help help these people to get housing, to get food, and to have their money end up going to that would just be disappointing and would have people lose faith in something that would be otherwise a very good thing.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, but the best thing we can do is what we're doing now, right, Anna? We get on the air, we talk about it. Hopefully people will hear this and direct their money to places that will actually work to help people clean their homes out and get them ready for repair, and making sure that if there are any communities that are heavily hit that maybe have lower rates of insurance, that those areas are also a priority for repair and rebuilding, to fill the gaps, because invariably there are going to be some gaps. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on today, Anna, research analyst for Bloomberg Bureau of National Affairs. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Stacey.
All right, talk to you soon. So I find it disturbing, but we've talked about it, so don't give to them. And you can actually the easiest way to do it is go to freebeacon.com, and they have the story on there, and I'll also put it in my Twitter feed. In other breaking news, as we go to the break, Tomi Lahren has just been signed as a Fox News contributor. She'll be contributing opinion, mainly to the Hannity program, but all over the network, as I'm sure we would expect.
15 seconds.
The only question is what took them so long. We knew this was going to happen. We'll be right back with more. Stay there.
St. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was
Yo, what's up?
Hey, what's nothing much, man. Just trying to listen to this last song for the music final.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna fail for the most part. I haven't even listened to it.
Ugh, yeah, me neither. I've been too busy listening to The Word on the Street.
The Word on the Street?
Wait, you guys haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Me.
Not that one.
Well, check this out.
There is only one true word, and that is the Word of God, which is what you will hear on Word on the Street, hosted by me, Victory McIntosh. Tune in as we discuss some of the latest hot topics and life issues and filter them all through the holy Word of God. It is possible to live righteous before the Lord and enjoy doing it. Tune in Saturday mornings at 9 Central Time. You don't want to miss it.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Look, the American people elected us expecting us to repeal Obamacare and bring about tax reform. We haven't repealed Obamacare. If we don't get tax reform done, we're dead. We might as well fold up our tent and go home.
But now you've got the problem of money for Harvey relief. I mean, does that come first in a separate bill, separate from the budget?
That's not clear yet, nor is it clear what exactly will be happening on that front generally. What I do know is that we've got a certain amount of time to get a lot of things done, and we need to get to work.
So you say we must get tax cuts done. I think most people would agree with you on that one. So what goes? Any chance of reforming Obamacare? Presumably that's gone. What about the infrastructure plan? Does that get cut into because the priority is tax cuts?
Yeah, I don't know. I still haven't seen an infrastructure proposal. I'm still curious about what that would look like. But what we do know is that we've got the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. What we do know is that the corporate tax rate, while it's something that a lot of people think of as being borne by big, wealthy corporate fat cats, in fact comes off of the bottom line of poor and middle-class Americans who pay higher prices on goods and services and have diminished wages and underemployment as a result of this high corporate tax rate.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right, at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. And welcome into the show. Everyone who's listening on live stream on Facebook, hey, and everyone who is kind of just tuning in from all over the country in all the different ways. Don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play. You can find those on my website. I actually put the links onto the podcast page because the podcasts for this show are coming in at urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy. But if you want to get to those links on iTunes and Google Play, you can click on the links on the website and find your way over there and subscribe. So we also have a ton of other information that we're going to be getting into right now. But I want to talk a little bit about so obviously the news about the tax reform plan. The president is in the state of Missouri today. He's in Springfield, which is a few hours away from here. And he's discussing what he wants to do to reform our taxes and lowering the taxes as well. Now, can he get it done? That's one of the things that's being discussed. Not so much what the plan is, but can he get it done? Can he get it finished? Because there's been some problems, obviously, what were the problems? Well, we couldn't get rid of Obamacare, or I shouldn't say we, they, meaning Congress, couldn't get it done. And so there's this interesting dichotomy here, and Senator Mike Lee just went over it. He states correctly that if they can't figure this out, he's on Varney and Company talking about this, they can't figure this out, then they're going into 2018 with nothing, a whole big fat bag of nothing, and they need to figure it out. So here's what we need to know about the president's tax reform plan. The objectives, as stated by the Trump administration, are economic growth, getting to 3% GDP within the year after implementation, and job creation. Now, here's the cake taker. We're a hair's breadth away from 3% GDP right now. So that's not going to be a hurdle to get over, but it is one of the things that they have on their list of things they want to do. The other objective is job creation. So when you're looking at the personal and individual tax reform aims of this proposal, they want to repeal the alternative minimum tax for individuals. And let me tell you something, okay? You know, this is one of those ones where I can get all head up over this topic. I really get ticked about the taxes because we have a punitive tax system. Liberals like to call it progressive, meaning the more successful you are, the more they take of what you earn. And liberals feel like, well, you're making so much, you don't need it all. But it is for people that earn the money, when you get that raise and then you see what the raise amounts to in your paycheck, it's infuriating because you had to do something to get the raise. I've never had anyone say to me, hey, you know what? We want to pay you a whole lot of extra money for nothing. I've never had that happen. I know it doesn't happen to liberals. I've never met one wealthy person that it's happened to. Every time you experience some growth in your pay, you also experience growth in the amount of work that you're doing. So when I've been able to get a raise, it's also come with more work, and I'm happy to do that work. But there are some days when you wake up and you're like, wow, I just wish I had the whole day off. But if you want to earn that money, you need to get up and take yourself into work. And so you're earning the money, and there's no reason why you should pay 49% or 37% or 24% because you're making more money. If 20% was good enough when you were making $50,000, 20% should be good enough when you're making $150,000. The alternative minimum tax is basically a punisher. Let's say you're making a certain amount of money, you make more money and you get into the next tax bracket. But when you go into that next tax bracket, you buy a larger house so you can take a larger deduction for mortgage interest. You also save more money and you shelter more of your money through investments. Maybe you buy a second house that you rent out, and so you're able to write all of the expenses off on that. So basically, you're not owing as much tax as they feel you should pay. That's when the alternative minimum tax kicks in. It kicks in when you hit a certain income level. Basically, they're saying, we don't care how much you feel like you don't owe more than this. We've got to make sure you pay a minimum amount of tax on that number because that number means something to us. I can tell you right now, all the numbers that I earn mean something to me too. So it's not about numbers. It should be about the percentage that is needed to run the government, the most lean and efficient government we can possibly have, the least pork, the least fraud, the least waste, the least abuse, and the least number of things that the government is taking on and doing outside of its constitutional mandate. And the federal government's only there to do a few specific things. All the other stuff they're doing is socialism, and it's getting in the way of Americans and business and freedom. So now that I've had that tirade, we've got the next thing that they want to do under this personal and individual tax reform section of the proposal is eliminate the death tax. They want to eliminate all tax deductions, including the mortgage and charitable deductions. Now, that sounds like catastrophic, like, whoa. But if you think about it, the reason we have so many deductions is because the deductions were passed and put into place to go up against the tax burden. So they would give in to the people who want more taxes, higher level of taxation, but they would also give in to the lobbyists and other people who were saying, look, we need to be able to deduct this. We need to be able to deduct that. And that's how you get a tax code that's over 8,000 pages, you know? So they also want to, oh, and by the way, freedom. When you hear they're no longer going to give you money off of your tax burden for charitable deductions, it means that you won't be getting credit for the money that you pay into your church for tithes and offerings. But it also means that the churches won't be beholden, because I think this kind of all connects up. The charitable deductions, it all connects up to the nonprofit status and all that stuff. There are going to be some changes, and I see it as inducing more freedom, letting pastors preach whatever they want from the pulpit. Why should the government have any say in that? Well, they're worried about losing their deductions. So we get to the business side in just a second here. Zero tax rate for the first $24,000 a couple earns. I'm not even going to say anything. Just keep on moving. 3 tax brackets, previously 7. So instead of 7, there would be 3, and they would be 10, 25, and 35. So a top rate of 35%, which is still theft, legalized theft. That's more than a third of every dollar that you earn automatically getting shunted off to the federal government just because you make a lot of money. My question is, why do they need it? We'll go back to Thomas Sowell's questions here in a minute. Why? What good is that going to do? 35% as comparison to what? I guess it's better to have 3 than to have 7. But how about 1? How about 1 tax rate? But, you know, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. And then they want to eliminate the marriage penalty. So that's where if you're single, you actually pay less in taxes than if you're married. I think that's a good thing for them to do. Anything they can do to slim this thing down some. So on the business side, they're looking at the tax reform package. Their goals are small, medium, and large businesses would all qualify for the business rate. So instead of punishing your business for its size, all businesses would be eligible for this rate. It lowers the business tax rate from 35% to 15%, putting us back right in the middle of the pack with all of the other countries that tax businesses. Right now, we have the highest business tax of any other nation. So this brings us back in line with other countries, which means all of this offshoring that you see, some of it is because their workers in foreign countries are cheaper. So they're chasing cheap labor. But some of it is because if they have their company based in a foreign country, the taxes are lower. So those companies then come back home. More jobs, more opportunity, more headquarters of Fortune 500 companies located in the United States, in our major cities and elsewhere, which means better jobs, more opportunity for Americans. A one-time tax on corporate earnings that have held overseas. So that's repatriating that money back inside. So money that is being held in foreign areas so it's not taxed would then be brought back into the United States. They'd only have to pay the tax once, and then they'd be done with it. A one-time tax on overseas profits, same. And then a 3.8% Obamacare tax on business investment. That tax on investment income would be repealed. Yes. And thank you very much. I like this. I like the way this sounds. I like the way it's put together. You can find this list, what you need to know. It's from earlier this year where Katie Pavlich actually wrote this piece up to kind of break down everything that's going on with this proposal. And so, it's exciting for the president to come for a very limited engagement. He's just basically coming in, flying into the Springfield airport, having this speech at a business there in town, and then getting back on the plane and leaving. It wasn't open to the public. Limited press was, approval was available. I have a show to do. I was planned on being here with you, so I didn't even attempt to find my way into that situation. Limited amount of tickets. None of them were for sale. I wasn't able to get anything more, no insider type stuff. And as I'm understanding it, there weren't a lot of interviews available, so it didn't make it worth it for me to try to get down to Springfield. But there's a ton of other things that we can expect, which is that a lot of the liberals are going to come out at this thing. They're going to come out at the tax proposal. And the first thing they're going to talk about is what's happening to the rich. What I'd like you to do as Americans, as taxpayers, as people who have every right to understand the perspectives of people who are speaking into your existence. You've heard me talk about taxes. You've heard me talk about how I don't like them. I don't like paying them. I don't like the fact that we have to pay so much. I don't like the fact that it's so complicated. And I don't like the fact that you work the first 3, almost 4 months of every year. If you earn any kind of money, you work the first 3.5 to 4 months of the year to satisfy your tax burden. I don't care how many roads you've paved. You haven't paved enough for me to work a quarter of the year for you. That's just not it for me. Now, that's my perspective. So you know that. You know it already. It's the Stacey on the Right show. This is not shocking. But when you're hearing these liberals, these leftists talk about what they feel about the president's tax plan, what they think it's going to do, when they start demonizing the Republicans and saying they're for the rich fat cats, I want you to just use your Google or your Bing search engine. And I want you to, whatever that person's name is, just look it up, just type in their name and net worth. And all of these public figures, you're going to probably be able to get, an idea of what they're worth. And then you can put that information along with the person and what they're saying, and it will help you understand exactly what you're hearing. I'm past all of this fear-mongering from the left. When you say you want the rich to pay more, do you realize that one of the most interesting stories, I'm going to pivot over. It's Will Smith. So a few years back when President Obama was in office and Bernie Sanders was kind of coming up with his whole, everyone needs to pay more in tax, Will Smith was in Paris and he was giving an interview for some movie that he had it was some kind of press junket he was on. And the reporter asked him about the tax that they were levying in France on wealthy people. And they took that tax up to, I believe it was at 70%. And so the billionaires were dive bombing out of France like nobody's business, because that's the thing about ultra wealthy people. whenever you create a tax to try to catch them and confiscate their wealth, they just use their $1,500 an hour CPAs and attorneys to find a way to shelter their funds from your greedy little hands. And so they asked Will Smith if he would be willing to pay that. And he said, nah, 70%, I'm out. That's too much to me. So even a man who earns $20 million a film, and that's the number I remember from before, he might be earning even more than that, $20 million a film, he doesn't want to give 70% of that away to the government. And he's really, how many months is he working to make a film? Maybe he works a year. So he works 12 months for $20 million. That's not the amount that he earns on the residual income of the film if the film does really well and the secondary markets when it comes out of the theaters and then it goes into DVD sales and all that stuff. You don't know what kind of a deal he's carved out for the in perpetuity type earnings that come for maybe being also getting an executive producer credit on the film, which he often does. Maybe there's all kinds of ways you can structure your contract so that you might get $300,000 up front, but you might also get, 30% of sales or what have you. So even knowing that it takes him less than 12 months to earn $20 million, Will Smith didn't feel like that worked out for him. 70%. And he's a hardcore liberal, a leftist. This isn't about parties so much as it is about people who earn money and those who simply pander for it.
30 seconds.
Watch what they're saying to you. Be a consumer of information where you can siphon through all of the garbage. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this. Stay with me.